Hello and welcome back, future scientists. I'm Mr. K with Mississippi Public Broadcasting. We're going to continue our lecture today talking about evolution. I wanted to get a little bit of review going with y'all before we started to cover new material. I wanted to make sure we were all on the same page. So if the teacher in the room could go ahead and pass out this worksheet for me, y'all take about 10-15 minutes to work on this. When you're ready for the review, come back to me and I'll do it on the board and make sure everybody's on the same page. All right, thanks so much. I'm sure that didn't give y'all any problem, but just in case it did, I'm going to review it on the board, and that way everybody's going to know exactly what's going on. So let's go ahead and take a look and see what's going on here. So we just got some review questions, okay? Number one says, what do you call an animal with 4 limbs? Okay, the term I need you to remember here is tetrapods. Tetra is a prefix that means 4, and pod is a suffix that means feet. So this is 4 feet, right? And what we're talking about is any animal with 4 limbs. So humans would fall into this. We got 2 legs, 2 arms, but also things like dogs, cats, horses, anything that's running on all 4s, right? It would be a tetrapod. This is going to be really important, and we'll get to why we need to know that term here in just a little bit. So let's go on to number 2. It says, what do you call structures that are similar in form between species? Okay, the answer here is C, homologous structures. Remember that that prefix homo and homologous means similar. And so what's going on here is that we have these different organisms, but the structures are very similar in between them. And we call that homologous structures, okay? And then let's get to 3, and I'll kind of tell you why all of this stuff is related and why it's so important. So number 3 here says, what is the arrangement of bones for the limbs of most tetrapods? The answer here is going to be A, 1 bone, 2 bone, many bones. I know that kind of sounds like a Dr. Seuss thing, but what's going on here is that if you were to look at the limbs of any tetrapods, humans included, we all have the same arrangement of our limb bones. Think about your arm, for example. Up here you've got your humerus, down here you've got your radius and your ulna, and then you have a lot of bones that make up your wrist and your hand. The same thing with our leg. When you're looking at the leg, the top part of the leg is the femur, and then you have the fibula and tibia in the lower leg, and then a lot of bones in the ankle and the foot. Okay, so that's the arrangement of the limbs in humans, but most tetrapods have that same layout of bones in their limbs. For scientists, this is a very strong piece of evidence that all of these organisms, all these tetrapods, probably share a common ancestor. If you were to go back far enough, you would be able to find some of those early organisms that left the water and started living on the land, and they also had this same arrangement of limb bones. 1 bone, 2 bone, many bones. So for scientists, that's a strong piece of evidence that that is probably a common ancestor for all of these tetrapods. It's just more likely that this arrangement of limb bones came about once and just stuck around in all these different organisms than every single tetrapod coming to this conclusion by themselves. So that's just a piece of evidence for the theory of evolution. Great, let's keep it going. So let's look at some of these down here. Number 4 says, studying embryos is known as. Okay, the term here is embryology, right? That suffix, ology, means study of. So this is the study of embryos, and this is another piece of evidence that supports the theory of evolution that I'll get into in just a little bit here after we do 5. 5 says embryos from different species look very different from each other. That's false. If you remember earlier, one of our previous lessons, we looked at embryos of a lot of different organisms. Turtles, cats, a pig, and a human, and a rabbit. And in those early gestation period, it was very hard to distinguish which embryo was which. A lot of these embryos, they have similar structures, and then they change, they become more specialized as the embryo gestates more. You might remember that all of those organisms that I mentioned earlier have these things called pharyngeal slits or gill arches. In fish, those would become the actual gills, and in humans, they become our jaw and our ears. So as the embryos gestate longer, they take on a more specialized form that makes it a little bit easier to tell what organism we're looking at. For scientists, that's a strong piece of evidence that supports the theory of evolution, because all these embryos kind of look alike to begin with, and then they just take on these more characteristic forms as they develop a little bit more. Let's keep it going. 6 says remnants from long dead organisms are known as. We want to go with letter B here, fossils, okay? Fossils. And the fossil record is a strong piece of evidence that supports the theory of evolution. Remember, evolution in a nutshell is just change over time. That's actually the answer to number 7 here, change over time. Well, when you're studying the fossil record, it's very easy to see how these organisms are changing over time. We can see it in a lot of different organisms. We can see it in between early humans and today's humans, how our body has changed over time, okay? And so 7, evolution can best be defined as it's just change over time. Right? We all change every single day. If you made a mistake today, you're going to try not to make that same mistake tomorrow. And so you're changing how you act, and that's basically what evolution is. It's just change over time. We're always changing, right? All right, let's go to this next one. Number 8 is the last one here. Number 8 says, one strong piece of evidence that supports the theory of evolution is the fact that all organisms contain. The answer that we want to go here with is A, DNA. Not all organisms have bones, only vertebrates have bones. Not all organisms have a mouth, and not all organisms have hands and feet. But all organisms, bacteria, plants, animals, prokaryotes, eukaryotes, we all have DNA in our cells. And again, for scientists, that's a strong piece of evidence that supports the theory of evolution. If you go back far enough, scientists think you would be able to find this hypothetical organism known as Luca, the last universal common ancestor, basically the first organism that started to use DNA in its cell. And it was so successful at passing on information from generation to generation that it stuck around. And now you can see it in every organism on Earth today. It's just more likely that that happened than each individual organism decided to start using DNA independently of each other. So again, if you go back far enough, you might be able to find the first creature that used DNA, Luca, last universal common ancestor, and that would be the common ancestor of all organisms on the planet today. So thank you so much for making it here today. Your teacher has some other work for you to do. Make sure to give it your best effort, and I hope everybody has a great day.